Welcome to the fastest daf in town. Today we're going to Kiddushin daf Mem Aleph. We're starting at the beginning of the second parak on Mem Aleph. Ha'ish mekadesh bo v'shlucho. The Gemara is going to explain this, but a man could be mekadesh a woman, which of course is no chiddush, but he can also have a shliach do it for him. Furthermore, ha'isha miskadeshes bo v'shlucha. A woman could accept her own Kiddushin, or she could appoint a shliach. And then finally, the Mishnah concludes, "Ish mekadesh bito kashihi naira bo uveshlucho." The father has the ability, while his daughter is a naira, which is officially between 12 and 12 and a half, and kol shekain, Rashi says, is a katana, since he has the ability to marry her off. So not only that, he also could have a shliach. Says the Gemara. Hashda b'shlucho. Now, the Mishnah tells us that you could appoint a shliach. So, mekadesh bo meboy, we know the whole concept of a shliach is, as we've seen previously, you can only appoint a shliach to do something that you yourself can do. So then, why does it say this? It's obviously that you could do this yourself. So, Rav Yosef, the chiddush is that mitzvah bo yosim b'shlucho. Even though it's true, you're able to appoint a shliach, but nonetheless it's better that you do it yourself. Says Rashi, "Dachi osik gufo b'mitzvos," that when you yourself are engaged in the mitzvah, not just have someone else do it for you, mikabel schar tvei, you get more reward. Kihad Rav Safram, we find this by some of the great people, that even though they could have taken for Shabbos at least preparing for food, they could have had someone else do it. He was mecharich reisha. He would singe the head. Rashi's L'Kavod Shabbos. Rava molech shibuta. Shibuta is also a fish, so he would salt the fish. So why would he do this? He can't get anyone else to do this for them. Yes, but it's important for them to be able to do it themselves. Ikad some say it differently. Baha Yisur Nami Yisba. The truth is, there's an element of an isser. Says Rashi, Im yachol kanish ba'atzmo. If you're actually able to do it yourself, but nonetheless you push it off and have v'shliach do it, so in that situation there could be a problem. Could Rabbi Yehuda Amarav? Do you remember Rabbi Yehuda Amarav? He says in the Amarav, also adam shekanish es isha ad shi'arena. It's a very amazing concept. A lot of people think, oh yeah, the religious people, they wait until the chuppah, they've never seen the woman until they actually are married. It's beferish. The Gemara says, not only is that not midas chasidus, it's usher. It's forbidden. You must see your wife. It's usher to marry a woman. Doesn't talk about nesuin. It's even Kiddushin. You're not allowed to be mekadesh a woman ad shirena until you see her. Shemi yiraba davar meguna v'tisganaba alav. Because what happens if it's too late and a shliach marries her off to you, and all of a sudden you didn't actually want the shidduch, and you find her not attractive or repulsive or not a match? Rachman omer b'havta reacha kamocha, which is another unbelievable line. B'havta reacha kamocha doesn't mean being nice to your neighbors. It also means your wife. You have to love your wife. Tachiyit mar Rav Yosef, when he mentioned the statement of Rav Yosef, mitzvah bo yoshim b'shlucho, as seifet mar ha'isha miskadeshes bo b'shlucho. Now, when it comes to a woman, so there it's a mitzvah for her to do it herself, but it's not an isser. Hashda b'shlucho so mikadsha bo meboy. So he asked the same question, that if she could appoint a shliach, then of course she should be able to accept the Kiddushin herself. So Rav Yosef mitzvah b'yosem b'shlucha, better that she should accept it herself. Ki had Rav Safra mecharech reisha, singed the head. Rava malach shibuta, he salted the fish. Rava baha, when it comes to a woman, yisur leisba. There is no isur k'derei shlokish. Derei shlokish tava meisiv tandu mo meisiv armelo. It's better to sit tandu. Says Rashi, mashalhu shanashim oimreis al baal. The women will say about their husbands, kol dehu shuhu toiv l'sheves im shnei gufim. It's at least better to be with someone else. Mishemes amana. than to be alone, which is also an unbelievable line. So Tan Rashi says is guf du shnayim. So again, the what the Gemara is basically trying to tell you is that according to this lashon, it's an isser for the man to appoint a shliach without knowing who she is. And for her, it's not an isser, but it's mitzvah boyos mishluch. It's better that she does it than having a shliach. Now again, the tremendous chiddush is that the unfortunate reality and lie that a lot of women have been taught in this day and age, in 2023, is that it's better to be alone. It's better to be alone. Better to work on your career. Don't worry about having a family. Don't worry about having children. Just be a professional, be rich. And unfortunately, at some point when they're older, they will say this line, Tava Mesiv Tandu Malesav Armelo. Doesn't mean that they'll pick anyone, but the element of being so picky, the problem is they end up not getting married, because you just will always find the negativity or the fault in a man, and there's no man that's perfect, so you could always find that fault. But if you have a different approach and say, you know what, I don't want to be alone, so therefore I'm going to have a different mindset, and I'm going to try to find someone who is suitable, someone who is appropriate for me. Not perfect, and by the way, I'm also not perfect. And then you'll end up getting married, and presumably what the Gemara is telling you is they'll be happier. Ha'ish mekanish es bito kashi naira. And then the last part of the Mishnah says that the father has the authorization to marry off his daughter, and therefore, as a naira or katana, and therefore he can also appoint a shliach. So kashi naira in, kashi katana lo. Sounds like, why as a naira? Why does the Gemara say naira? It must be, it's telling you Dafka is a naira, not a katana. Now, the way that Rashi learned it is maybe that's the chiddush. The chiddush is that even as a naira, he has that authorization. But the Gemara wants to make a different interpretation, saying, no, he really should not marry her off when she's so young. Messiah Rab, the Rabbi Yehuda Marav, the Item Rabbi Lazar, some was him. Also, Adam Shikanish is bitu kashi katana shetigdal v'timer b'poin any raitza. That even though you, the father, have the right to do something, you should still consult your daughter. You should wait until she's old enough to have enough of ability to be able to know what's going on in her life and to be able to say, this is the guy I want. Now this is an unbelievable taisus. Unbelievable. It says taisus v'achshav shanu haganu kadosh b'noisenu elfil katanois. How can we go against the Gemara? Apparently, they did this in those days. A girl who was a katana, they would still marry her off. So Taisa says, "Hainu mishum shebachol yom biyom hagolus mischaber leinu." Golus is very difficult. Nimesh sipuk biyad adam achshav lasis levito nedunya. If you have the money now, shemel achar zman lo yasipik biyadai. You may not have that money later on. What are you talking about? I'm rich. Everything's good. Yeah, things are good for you now. That doesn't mean things are going to be good for you later on. Maybe someone is going to confiscate your house and all the assets you've been working for your entire life. And your daughter may not have the ability to get married, which is an unfortunate reality to recognize. We are in Golus. I don't care which country you're living in. People in Germany pre-World War II would not have imagined the Holocaust. So for a person to be naive to think that a Yid can be comfortable because they're rich today does not necessarily mean you're going to be rich tomorrow, unfortunately. Now let's go into the Gemara. Shlichus Manon. How do we know this concept of Shlichus? The Gemara here is telling us that when it comes to this person, whether it's the husband or the daughter or the father, that they have an ability to be able to appoint a shliach. So the question is, how do we see that you can appoint a shliach? Maybe you have to do these things yourself. The Sanya, v'shilach. The pasuk says v'shilach, and Rashi says begerushin ksiv. When it comes to divorcing, it says v'shilach. So since it says it regarding divorce, that teaches you can make a shliach. V'shilcha, So Malama Shehi also shliach, that she could make a shliach. V'shilach v'shilcha, the fact that you have v'shilach and v'shilcha, as Rashi says, Shnei Pamim Nemar Bein, and it says it twice. It's not just one word; it's twice. Malama Shliach Shliach means an agent can appoint, even a shliach can appoint a shliach. Ashchan begerushin, so that's by gittin. Kiddushin no, the chitem adiyal begerushin, mal begerushin shchen yeshin bal karcha. Maybe the reason why you could appoint a shliach is because, and there's a din of shlichus, is because you could even divorce her against her will. So therefore, the get works in circumstances which do not work by Kiddushin. So by Gerushin it works even Bal Karcha, so maybe you can also work with a Shliach. But Kiddushin has to be with her consent, as we saw in Daf Beis, so too maybe also without a Shliach. As we've seen in many places, that's the hekesh, and that's it. You can't, it's an undeniable hekesh. So therefore, since we make a hekesh having a seal, like we did by shtar also, so therefore it teaches us that whatever the dinim are by gerushin, also by Kiddushin. Vel hadit not. We learn ha'aymer l'shluchai. A person says to a shliach, say, Toraim, go and take off truma for me. So term kadas bal habayis. You should do what is the das of the bal habayis, says Rashi. Lafima shehu makir bal habayis. You should know this guy, have an idea of how much he would be wanting to give. Says Rashi, what does that mean? So imenu yafe or enu ra, depending if you're a generous or stingy person. Ayin yafa echan me'arbayim, gives 1/40. Ayin ra echan me'shishim. Someone who's a little more stingy gives only 1/60. Shatruma lo nemar bashir, because the Torah doesn't have a shir for truma explicit. El reishis de guncha, they feel kol shehu. So therefore, there's this leeway when it comes to how much one can give. It's basically normally either 1/40 or 1/60. However, it says the Gemara, there is a middle ground which is 1/50. As we continue to mem from the base, so we see clearly when it comes to dinim of truma, there's also a din of shlichus. If you gave a tenth higher or less, so you end up giving 1/40 to 1/60, even though you should have only given 1/50, the din is that it is a good truma. So how do we know it works there? Let's turn it now again from Gerushin. It says v'shilach. Mal Gerushin shchein yeshin b'chol. When it comes to truma, you can't learn out from truma because truma is chol. It's not holy. So maybe because it's dinim of kedusha, there you have to do it yourself. When it comes to like doing a mitzvah, you have to do it yourself. Something which is chol, even though there's a mitzvah of Kiddushin, Gerushin, but Gerushin itself has no connection to Kiddushin, Truma, and Tahara. So therefore, maybe in that situation, the din is that you cannot appoint a shliach. So atem gam atem rabasas l'shliach. The answer is because the pasuk says atem. Why does it say gam atem? Kain tarimu gam atem. Also you. I mean also you. You. So who's also? So you're including someone else, which is the shliach. So therefore, we now know there's shlichus by Kiddushin, by Gerushin, Kiddushin through a hekesh, and truma because there's gamatem. So v'niktav rachmanim truma v'nesu hanach v'nigmer minei. Why don't learn everything out from truma? Just have truma and that's it. Mishum de'ikol mifrach shechein yeshna b'machshava. Because when it comes to truma, the reason why maybe a shlichus works there is because it works so easily that even through thought, says Rashi, noisin eina b'tzad zeh v'oicha b'tzad zeh t'chsev v'nechshav. If let's say you cast your eyes on one side and you eat on the other side, it still works. So because of that, we're lenient. Okay. So then we ask another question about another shlichus. Chabura she'avad pischa. You have a chabura that lost its carbon pesach, which you can see Psachim Sadi Chesed Beis, which is the last very long Mishnah Psachim right before Ari Psachim. Ve'amar le'echad, and you say to one person, say uvakesh, go and look for it. Ushchoit Elena Shechta for us. Maholach Umatzah, he actually found the animal. He found this guy was good. However, they didn't believe he was going to find it. They shechted somewhat a different carbon. So if his was shechted first, so who oichel mishalo, so he can eat from which is his. They're allowed to eat also with him because he shechted it first. So therefore, that was the carbon. But even though it gets into much greater detail, but no one. Just the Gemara asks, how do we know? In other words, based on that one Mishnah, it teaches us there's a concept of a shliach when it comes to carbon pesach. But how do we know? So learn out from these other cases. Even though it's true, what do you mean? We're talking about truma, but truma is chol in comparison to kodshim. Kodshim obviously is much stronger than truma. So nafgit, therefore we have to learn out separately. So nafgit Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha. Yomi Yeshua ben Karcha menayin sheshol chashol adam kumosum. How do I know a person can make a shliach? Shnemar b'shachtu also kol kahaladas ben koladas Yisrael ben Arbayim. That who's going to shecht it? Every Yid, every Jew in Klal Yisrael will shecht the carbon pesach. In fact, the Gemara, how's that possible? They all do it. The way it works is you have a chabura, you have a group of people that are pre-designated for a particular carbon. One person has the carbon shechted, prepared, and then everyone eats. So it doesn't mean everyone does it. So we see clearly from here that it's a shliach will do the shchita of the carbon pesach for you. Okay, let's hold off 1 second. Let's see a couple of questions. First of all, question 9, which I should have done in the previous Amud. My hilchasa nafgalon. What do we learn out? That when it comes to a woman, she could appoint a shliach, even though she could. There's no isser for a woman to be mekadesh with a shliach. Mashenkin, when it comes to a man, their taka is an isser if he doesn't see her first. Question 10. Yisrael. Of course, part of the men are much more visual when it comes to relationships as opposed to women. Not that women don't want to be able to be married to a man that she's attracted to, but men in general are more attracted visually. V'shachto also called kahal das Yisrael. V'chi kol kahal shaychden v'loy enu shayched hel echad. So one answer that we just said is clearly that teaches us the din of shlichus. But we're going to have a second answer, which we'll see probably in tomorrow's daf. But that is one of the answers based on that pasuk teaches us shlichus. So back to the Gemara. So why don't you just learn out from Kiddushin? Why do you need Gerushin, and the Hekesh to Kiddushin and Truma? Because almost everything is done al yedei shliach. We discussed this whole notion, even though the Gemara discusses the Kohanim. Are they our shluchim, or is it shluchim didan or shluchim rachmana? And Lamaskana, we said it must actually be, even though they're our shluchim, they're not really our shliach, because if I can't do it, then they can't do it. So really, it's a riot shluchim rachmana, but nonetheless, it is shlichus. So therefore, we see the whole notion of karbanos is al yedei shliach. So maybe that's why it works there. So chad machad lo asya. You can't learn out one from the other. So teisei chad matarti, as the Gemara often does. Tried to do this with Kiddushin in the beginning of the Masechta with Kesser Shtar and Bia. So maybe teisei chad matarti. So hey teisei lo nichtav rachmana b'kodshim. So don't mention kodshim. But teisei mahanach, and learn out Kodshim from all the other ones. We said you can't do that. It's a Kodshim. You can't do that because Kodshim you can't derive from them because it's Kodshim. And those are Chol. So don't mention Gerushin. So when it comes to Gerushin, you can't divorce a woman with thought. Otherwise, maybe a lot of people would get divorced fast. Mashenkin, when it comes to Truma, we already established can be done b'machshava. Rashi here also says Kodshim nami isdu b'machshava. So too when it comes to Kodshim, Gomor belibo loimer shor ze oila. If a person in his heart says this ox is going to be a carbon oila, har ze oila, that already becomes a carbon oila. So it's not exclusive to the din of truma. It's also by kachim. We have this concept. So maybe because of that, we're going to be lenient and allow shlichus, but maybe not by gershon, which obviously cannot be done machshava. Thank goodness. So shekain yeshnu b'machshava. Ella lo nechtam rachmana b'truma v'teisi mahanach. It doesn't talk about Kiddushin, because Kiddushin is only a derivative connected to gershon. But how about truma? So maybe you can learn that from truma. You don't need truma. The Gemara says hachinami. You're right. You actually only need kachim and or Korban Pesach and gershon, and then you can learn out truma from it. Because if kachim works, which is kodesh, so then certainly truma should work, and they're both of a machshava, so that has nothing to do with it, and that's it. So you should be able to learn out one from the other. Vel atem gam atem lamali. So then why then does the pasuk say gam atem? It can't be to teach us about shlichus with regard to a truma. When it comes to appointing someone to separate the truma, they have to be a b'nei bris. Has to be Jewish. Halamli kra. So why do we need a pasuk? Rav Chia Barabba and Rav Yochanan. Going on from him. Dear Rav Chia Barabba and Rav Yochanan. Ena evanasa shliach l'kabel get miyad bala shel isha. Where the din is that an eved, a slave, cannot become a shliach to accept a get from the hands of the bala shel isha, from the husband. A husband cannot, who normally gives a get to the woman. So yes, there could be a shliach, but the eved cannot be the shliach in this case when it comes to gittin. He has no shaychus to gittin Kiddushin. So if you have no shaychus to gittin Kiddushin, says Rashi, Alma will boykra. You don't need a pasuk to tell you this. The misvara islan lameimer the midi deloy shaykh ba lumasavin shliach. You can only be a shliach, as we said before, in something that you have some shaychus, some connection to. So in this situation, obviously Ben Bris is the only one who's mechuyev to separate truma. So why do we need a pasuk to exclude someone who's she'enu ben bris? And enu ben bris has no shaychus to shlichus. So of course not. Just like we see when it comes to get, that an eved has no shaychus to gittin. So it's sakdanamina eved delav bar heteru hu klal. When it comes to an eved, he has no shaychus to a divorce document at all, and therefore that's the reason why it doesn't work. Over here, there is a chiddush by truma. Why? Someone who's not a ben bris, there is an element of truma. If they would decide to separate their own truma, even though they're an enim mitzvah v'yaisa, they don't have to do it, but they separate the truma anyway. So what is the din? Is it nothing? No, it's actually a valid truma. Trumas and truma. Says Rashi, we aser lazarim. They hold that this actually will now be forbidden to a zar. Says Rashi, the ksaver ein kini of kachavim be'eretz Yisrael lafkia miruach of kachavim enu paiter min hatruma. Okay, so we see that taka works. Amash, since they actually do have shaychus to truma, Amash lech nami avid kamash mulan. That's the whole chiddush. Pum fakert. You're saying, oh, we see by an eved that anytime there's no shaychus to a situation, to a case, like by gittin, that's not going to work. You're right. But over here, that's not the situation. Here, an Ovid Kachavim is able to separate his own truma. Doesn't have to, but if he does, it's considered to be a truma. Now, a non-Kohen cannot eat from this. So therefore, you would think that they could also be a shliach for truma kamash one. That's why you need a pasuk. Rav Shimon the Potter, according to Rav Shimon, he disagrees, and he says he's Potter that not truma of kachavim. When it comes to truma of an ovid kachavim, as well as midamas, says Rashi, im naflo l'chulin. If let's say it fell into, not also, but his truma that fell into chulin, so the din is, normally, because it's this forbidden mixture, non-Kohen can't eat it. So the din is it's midamas. So midamas, it's considered like it's mixed in, and therefore a person who would eat it b'shogeg is going to be chayiv to add an additional fifth, like the regular din. Rav Shimon Paiter. Rav Shimon says no. Why? Because Rav Shimon holds that when they are engaged in this process, there's no din of truma. Therefore, if they even themselves separate the truma, it's not a truma, and therefore, if a person would eat it, it's not considered to be dabas, and therefore, a person is not going to be chayiv chaimish. So, if that's the case, we go back to the original question, just like an eved, atem gam atem lamli. So then, why does it need to say atem gam atem? Don't tell me to teach you that you have to be bnei bris. It's obvious. So no, still, itzrach, we need it. Salchadat dechamina, because we'd have thought hoyel, since the amar mar atem, it says atem v'lo arisin. What is that coming to exclude? Sharecroppers, says Rashi. Actually, let's finish this up. V'lo arisin, atem v'lo shutman. You are not partners. Atem v'lo apitropos, not someone who's a guardian. Atem v'lo hatarim eshenu shaloi. You must be the one that separates, and not someone who the truma doesn't belong to them. You would maybe think that you cannot appoint a shliach, even though it's true. Technically, you should be able to learn out truma from Gerushin and from Kachim, but nonetheless, we still need gamatem, because you would maybe think it's different, because there's so many exceptions that we do not allow when it comes to truma, and therefore, because that maybe would also think only you could separate your truma for whatever reason, because you have all these other cases that you can't separate. No one else can do it, so maybe you can't have a shliach either. Okay, we're going to stop there. But look at Rashi. Rashi says, Istrach, l'riboy shliach l'truma mishum dechsiv atem, l'mute arisin, militroim. Sharecroppers or tenant farmers cannot take off the truma, chelko shel baal bayis, the portion of the baal bayis, even though they have their own portion. The apitropos yisoimim, people who are guardians of a yasum, the orphan's property, without their consent. Of course, it was with das, then that's allowed, because then you're considered to be a shliach, and therefore that is what's referring to. Okay, let's see maybe a couple questions here. TA 8. B'ma tluya ha'she'el himsarch miyat l'may goy she'enu bar shlichas b'truma. So what exactly is the thought process? And the question is it a davar pashut? says oh al hamas b'plota detanai in goy isa b'truma denavshe. Right? It's totally on whether or not he's able to separate his own truma. That's TA 8. Evid the love bar hateru klal, but oivel kachavim hoyel v'isei b'truma denavshe, which again is a machlokus, because Rav Shimon is poiter. He says it's not the case. Okay, TB 9. Ksiv v'shachto soy kol kal das esoben arbayim v'chikol kal kun shaykh levulayno shaykh elechad, which is the same question as question 10, which we are going to have two answers to this question. The first one teaches us that shluch shalom kamoiso, that you can have someone shecht on your behalf. Adkan.